Hey everyone, welcome to Fantasy Footy Fan. It's Jeff here, and footy is back. Round one's completed, SuperCoach is back. We're back to having every single team play in the round, and we're back to having games at the G, Carlton and Richmond, Thursday night at the G. And it's just great to have SuperCoach and footy back. Hopefully your week went well, or your weekend went well with your team. So in this video, it's just a round one review, just a round one review. But in this video, what I'll also be doing is I'll be talking about my team and the decisions that I made around why I picked this team for the year, because it's a little bit different to the team I had in my last video. If you've been looking at my videos and watching my videos, it is a little bit different, and I didn't get time. It's a pretty flat out week for me, so I didn't get time to put up any videos last week. So I'm going to go through each game, discuss any relevant SuperCoach players. I'll also look at potential players that we could bring in. I'll look at my potential trades for next week as well, and I'll discuss some captaincy options for this week. So as you can see, I had a pretty decent start, so 2258. I'm pretty happy with that. Being ranked 4,386 is a good start to the year, so I'm pretty happy with that. So now I've got to maintain it, but that, of course, is a round where every one of my players played. So it's going to be about navigating through the early buys and seeing where I finish up at the end of round 6. So looking into my team, I did make some pretty big changes to my team. And it all started with wanting to take advantage of some of the round 0 scores. So my thinking kind of changed in relation to picking players that have an early buy. So I had Zach Fisher at F2. So you'll see that Heaney's there, but I had Zach Fisher at F2, and I wanted to bring in Heaney because of his round 0 score, which was I think 144. But I also could see, looking at his game that he played against Collingwood, that he had that midfield role. He definitely had that role, and I knew that because they're short on midfielders, that he was probably going to play that role at least for the first few weeks. And it really paid off bringing Heaney in, because again, he scored 136, so his price is going to skyrocket. But to upgrade from Fisher to Heaney, I had about 100k I needed to get from somewhere. So I actually had Sheasel in my defense, and so I traded him out for Will Powell. So that gave me about 40k. But the reason I chose Powell, he did have a really good score in the first round, but I was big on Powell. In my previous videos, I'd mentioned with Will Powell that I really do feel he's going to have a good year this year playing across half back. I did mention him in one of my videos and went through some stats. So this is a tactical move, because the purpose of bringing in Will Powell was not only just to get that 40,000k, I think, but I also do really want to bring Sheasel into my team. I mean, I think he got 130 or something like that this week. So the plan is in round 3, when Will Powell has his bye, hopefully he gets that price spike, because by then Sheasel would have only played 2 games and Powell 3, so he would have gotten a jump in his price, and hopefully it's big enough so that I can actually bring Sheasel in when Powell has his bye. We get 5 trades extra during these early buy rounds, so I'm going to use 2 of them for tactical trades. And so one of those tactical trades is trading out Will Powell and bringing in Sheasel. So that's my plan at this stage. We'll see how it all plays out. So the other change I had to make, I had Caleb Sarong in my team. Can you believe it? He scored 170. I decided to actually go down from Caleb Sarong to Connor Rozee. and I think that gave me something like 20k. I figured that Rosie and Sarong may end up averaging around the same throughout the year, but I have been big on Sarong. In all my videos, Sarong has been in my team, and from the moment SuperCoach opened and I just took him out for Rosie, that would have been awesome to having that 170 in my team, but that's just the way everything worked out. So I got that extra cash, and then I upgraded Fisher to Heaney, and that's paid off for me as well, because I think Fisher got 50, I'm pretty sure, and Heaney's ended up getting 136. So I'm just having a quick look at Fisher's score. Yeah, so he got 50, and Heaney got 136. So I got an extra, 86 points there. So that, I guess it's kind of worked out. So the plan with Heaney is that when he gets his bye in round 5, that I will likely trade him out for Flanders, because I think Flanders is probably going to be the top scoring forward for the year, and he's already off to a fantastic start. So I'm hoping I'll be able to afford him, and that Heaney continues playing. I think in the midfield, I guess the first 5 rounds, I think we'll get some good money out of Heaney. Then some midfielders might start coming back into Sydney's team, and then he might not play in the midfield as much. So I think that's a good time, is just to trade him out at his bye. So those are the 2 tactical trades I'm using: is Powell in round 3 to Sheasel, and Heaney in round 5 to Flanders. That's the plan at this stage, but that of course can change. But getting into the games, actually, no, the other thing I wanted to mention, just my captains, yeah. So I had Nick Dacos VC. I think a lot of us would have, if you've got Nick Dacos, I mean, he's owned by 70% of teams. So I think a lot of us that have Nick Dacos would have probably gone Nick Dacos for our VC. But I had to take that. It was a 135. You've got to take a 135. But I did have the captaincy on Tom Green. That would have been nice to have had that with Tom Green getting a 152. I was thinking of captaining Gawn as well, and he got 162. So, but I'm still happy with that. And likely this coming week, I may end up VCing Dacos again against St Kilda, although they do have some potential tagging options there. But yeah, that's what I might do. But getting into the games anyway, that's starting on Thursday night with the Blues and the Tigers. That was a cracker of a game. Really enjoyed that game. Cripps was fantastic. He was best on ground. I mean, he's not really a SuperCoach relevant player, but I wanted to mention him anyway. He had 31 possessions and 7 tackles for 135 points. Clearly the best player on the ground. Some may argue that maybe Harry Mackay was the best player on the ground, but I thought it was Cripps. But looking at more SuperCoach relevant players, Jack Carroll was great. He had 20 possessions in 73% game time for 74 points. So I'll just quickly bring up Carroll here. So he's got the bye this week. So he's played his 2 games, and his break even is negative 70. So he's going to jump up in price. He might be a good one to bring in either this week or next week, depending on what your plans are. But especially with the way Clark played, we may end up sort of taking Clark out for Carroll. But if Carroll's named in the best 22, which I think he will be, the coach and the players are speaking very highly of him. And he did have actually 52% CBAs as well in this game. So it looks like they want to rotate him through the midfield. So he could actually be a really great cash cow for us in the midfield. 123k mid. We were all hoping that Jai Clark would be that player, but he had a really bad game. He could turn it around anyway next round, but I got my eye on Carroll. And Walsh, we don't know how long Walsh is away, but anyway, in the meantime, Carroll will continue to get CBAs, and also with Doherty out too, so Carroll should get more CBAs. Hewitt was a bit disappointing. I was expecting more from him, considering that he was playing more in the midfield with Doherty out. But yeah, he only had 20 possessions for 76 points. So yeah, very disappointing if you had jumped on him. Zach Williams, he actually had an okay game. So he's owned, I think, by 60. It's about 64% of teams, or 63. We have 63% of teams, and he had 15 possessions in 77% game time for 51 points. So, not bad, not a bad game. We're hoping for more than that. We'll talk about potential trades later, but Ambrosio, obviously, D'Ambrosio comes to mind. But he did get. I was watching the game and he got off to a slow start in the first quarter, but in the second quarter, he did quite well. Then again in our final quarter, just like in the opening round, he had a really bad last quarter. He only had 1 point in this last quarter. But as he continues to get more games into him, he'll be a good cash cow for us, I think. But if you don't have him in your team, I wouldn't say he's a must-have, especially with how D'Ambrosio did over the weekend. And there's other cheaper rookie price players that play in defense that in the next week or so might be better value. Remember as well that we want to be making 150k off these sort of rookie priced players. And these cheap players, and in Williams' case, he just needs to average 65 to make 150k, and I think he's quite capable of doing that. So yeah, just keep a lookout for Williams and how he goes, and I think he'll come good. I think he'll average in the 60s and 70s. Nankervis had a really good game. I think. He had 19 possessions, 21 hitouts, 137 points. I think if he, continues to play the way that he's playing, which he will, I think that's it for Naismith. He won't be getting into that team unless Nank is injured. But I think if Nank does have an injury, I think we should certainly be looking at bringing Naismith into the team. Jaden Short, he was on track for a really good score. But then in the end, only finished with an 88 from 19 possessions, and he kicked a goal as well. Now, look, we only have a small sample size, but this was my concern with Short, is that he's a great preseason player. He did do well in round 0, fair enough. But he hasn't hit that 100-point average yet. And that was my only worry in picking Jaden Short, was I just don't know whether he is capable of averaging 100. His scores do fluctuate, but again, you never know. This could be the year under Uze. He's averaging 109 now, so he might be able to hold that. And then, of course, the very sad news with Gibcus. That was so sad for the kid. He ended up doing his ACL. We really hope, of course, that he has a good recovery and he's able to be fit and ready for preseason for next year. We hope that he recovers well. He ended up with 19 points in 40% game time, and he looked like he was doing okay before he got injured. Now we've got to try to find a replacement for Gibcus, so we'll go through that a little bit later. The funny thing is, and this situation is not funny, but the funny thing is that I did have Hustwaite in my team, and I think a few had Hustwaite, I think, as well. I had him at something like M7, and of course he was named as an emergency, so I had to make a choice. Do I downgrade him or do I upgrade him? So I then saw that Sam Berry was named on the ball. Now that doesn't mean anything, because as I said in my last video, coaches throw out these teams for round 1, and they put players in all kinds of weird positions sometimes. So the fact he was named on the ball doesn't mean a thing. He ended up starting, I think, on the bench anyway, but did play on the ball. Anyway, I'll come to the to the Adelaide game anyway. But what I did was I ended up downgrading Gibcus for Marty Hore so that I could have the cash to upgrade Hustwaite to Sam Berry. And I did that at the last minute. I had Gibcus on the bench, so that very fortunate that worked out for me in not having Gibcus. But I know many of you would have actually had Gibcus. He's 60% owned, so I know many of you would have either had him on the ground on the bench, and now we've got to try to come up with another rookie. We've got to trade him too. But we'll get to that a bit later. But moving on to the Pies and Swans game. So Dacos spent a little bit less time in the middle with only 57% CBAs, but of course it didn't stop the little master. He ended up with 37 possessions and a goal for 135 points. So this was the big question, wasn't it, when we were all thinking about picking Dacos or not? Do we pick him? Because he's got the early buy. I mean, if you look at him, he's owned by 79% of teams now. So it looked like with all this talk about not picking him because he's got the early buy, most of us ended up jumping on him, and it's worked out. I mean, he's averaging 133. I think he'll continue to average, well, maybe not 133, but he'll continue to average between 120 and 130, I think, for the year. So I'm really happy I started with him. Darcy Cameron, now I know most don't have him, but you may consider chasing that price, because he's averaging, what's he averaging? 113. His break even is 59. So he scored a 94 over the weekend from 17 possessions. He'll have a pretty decent price hike after his game, although it's projecting only 11k price if he gets 84 this round. So yeah, maybe that was just a bit of a waste of time talking about him, but moving on anyway. Charlie Dean, he ended up doing okay, and he's a cheap rookie. We may even end up considering bringing him in, because we don't know when Nathan Murphy's coming in, and he's kind of filling in for Nathan Murphy. So he had 12 possessions in 87% game time for 57 points. And he looks like he's got pretty good job security for the moment. Again, with Gibcus out and maybe even Reed out, we don't know about Reed yet. We may think of replacing one of them with Charlie Dean. But there's a few options there. But yeah, he's just one option. So Finn McRae is an interesting one. We all jumped off him when we knew that he was going to be a sub, and he only scored 28. He's 13% owned. Like, that's a real surprise. Obviously, it's teams, people who are playing but maybe not really interested, or forgot they had him, or forgot to change him. But started as the sub. Got 8 possessions in 26% game time for 28 points. So his points per minute is pretty good. And I just don't know how long Craig McRae can actually hold Finn back. He's going to have to start him soon. His break even is 30, so he obviously should get that. But I think they're going to have to start him soon. Because he actually does very well for the team when he plays, so we'll keep an eye on that. Craig McRae pretty much confirmed that Ash Johnson is not going to play this week. So what that means is it may give an opportunity to Reef McInnes. He's a 123k forward. That doesn't mean that we have to bring him in this week. We can wait for his 2 games and then see how he goes. But yeah, that's just something to be conscious of, be wary of. There are a lot of positives with Sydney, and that's starting with Isaac Heaney. So he had a fantastic game, 29 possessions, 2 goals for 136 points. He had 64% CBAs, so he's going to have a massive price spike as well. His break even is -12. So he's a good pick if you started him. He's owned by 24% of teams, so all of his owners are going to be very, very happy. But it's, of course, what do we do with him when he gets to his bye? Do we keep him or do we trade him? What if he's averaging 140 or 130 by the time his bye comes around? What do we do then? That's something I'm going to have to think about, because I did plan on trading him out for Flanders. But if he's averaging 130, 140, I may have to change my mind and I may end up keeping him. So yeah, we'll just see. But so far, he's been a really good pick. Chad Warner, he also had a great game. He had 27 possessions and 3 goals for 125 points. So his break-even's 68. So he had 118 in his first game, 125 in this game. So he's in good form, but only 2% owned. So yeah, I guess no one's really going to be bringing him in because he's got his bye. But a player that is quite popular is Errol Goulden. He's 22% owned. It was a lot higher than that. I think it got into the 40s maybe. But then with his round 1 score, or round 0, so I should say round 0 score, maybe some jumped off him then. But he ended up having 30 possessions for 109 points. I think it's definitely best to just wait till he bottoms out. His break-even's 159. Look, there's every chance that he could achieve that this week. He's got the potential to. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. If he doesn't get that 116 score that he's projected to, he's going to lose 20k. So it might be something that we keep an eye on and see where he sits by the time his bye comes around, because he may have lost. And he may have lost a few dollars, may have gone down in price, and he may be a good option to bring in at that point. James Jordan was a good pick, I think, as well, and he did quite well. He had 19 possessions for 84 points, so his break-even's -12. He's a good choice at his price, 275k, good value, yeah, I'm very happy that I started him. Now, Grundy is the interesting one here. We'll go through some of his stats because his owners, the 73% of teams that own him, would have been so disappointed with his score. That includes me. So considering what he scored last week was 139 he got last week. So he had 8 possessions and 22 hitouts. In 71% game time for 71 points. So we may think, oh no, he had a horrible game. But look, this is the thing. He lost 64 points in clangers and free kicks against. So he actually didn't play badly as such. Because if you put all the points that he got, like the free kicks and the clangers that he actually got, he actually played okay, and I don't think he's doing that every week, although he did give a lot of free kicks away in round 0. But he's not giving up 64 points every week in clangers and free kicks. So I don't think we need to react to Grundy. Some might think of trading him down now to Sherry. That's an option if you want to do that, make some structural changes. But yeah, I think for Grundy owners, we don't need to worry too much. Let's see how he goes next week. Roberts, he's doing his job. I probably should have started McKercher on my field because McKercher I put on the bench. He got 88 points. Roberts got 69. It's not much of a difference, but it would have been good to have started McKercher instead. Or instead of Sanders. Who knew that Sanders was going to be subbed out? But we'll get to that game later. But yeah, Matt Roberts is doing okay. He got 15 possessions for 69 points. Break even is -58. So he's going to make some good cash for us if you've got him in your team. He's owned by 47% of teams. So yeah, half the comp has him, and I think as I said, he'll be a good cash cow. Moving on to the Essendon and Hawthorn game. So yeah, if you've got Nick Martin, you would have been very disappointed. 26% owned, so a lot were expecting him to do well. His price is probably going to drop. His break even's 122. Is it panic stations yet? Look, probably not. I think similar to Grundy, there's another thing we got to consider with him. He did get 63, which is not great, but the positive signs is that he got 25 possessions. So he's getting the ball and he's got that role at halfback pushing up the ground. So he's got the role and he's getting the ball. And he was on the ground for 92% of the time. So he's fit, he's on the ground, and he's getting the ball. Which is, 92% is very, very high. So these are all really good signs, but obviously his low score was as a result of his terrible, terrible disposal and decision making. He had 4 clangers, so that's 16 points there, and his disposal efficiency was 56%, and that's where he lost all of his points. He actually did quite well in AFL Fantasy. He was like nearly 100 points. But in SuperCoach, because of his disposal efficiency, he only got 63. But look, I think it's best to stick with him. I think he'll come good this week and have a really good score. But again, if he has another low score and his break even ends up jumping up to like 200, look, you may think, well, okay, I might trade him to one of those other players in that price point. We've got, I think, 5 players that are quite popular in that price point. So there's Nick Martin, there's Ollie Wines, Carl Amon, Max Holmes, and Matt Crouch. And Matt Crouch did really well. So we've got a few players around that price point that we're expecting to do well this year. So we may want to think about them. But I think for now, if you got Nick Martin, just stick with him. Next up, Zach Merritt. He had a really good game, as you'd expect from a super uber premium like Zach Merritt. He didn't end up having that issue of the Finn McGuinness tag. Finn was the sub, and then when he came on the ground, he went to Chol in the forward line, and I think it looks like that's how Finn McGuinness is going to be used. That he's going to line up on a forward pocket kind of type player, although Chol's not really forward pocket, but he's going to line up on someone in the forward line. But maybe Sam Mitchell might make the exception when they play against Collingwood because of how well Finn McGuinness has done on Dacos in the past. So that is a possibility. Zach Merritt did really well. Ended up with 127 points. So if you've got him as an owner, he's only 8% of teams that own him. You'll be pretty happy with that. And actually ended up with 31 disposals, 8 marks as well. So he's just a gun player and a great premium to have. Unfortunately, Zach Reed injured himself. I think they called it hamstring awareness. And he only scored 15 points from 33% game time. So we'll see. I think there's a possibility he may end up lining up this week. I think they took him off as a precaution. So, we're just going to keep an eye out on that to see whether we hold him or whether we trade him to another rookie. So D'Ambrosio, I think he was the talking point. And I was watching this game and he actually did very, very well. Had a really good game off halfback, and I think we've got to consider him seriously. He had 30 possessions, 13 contested for 122 points. So he had a really good game. And likely there may be a bit of ball down back for Hawthorn this year. I think they'll improve from last year, but I think that there's going to be a lot of teams that will be quite successful against Hawthorn this year. And so D'Ambrosio should get a fair bit of that ball down back. He's owned by 9% of teams, so there's a few that have jumped on him. He's only 225k, so I think he's one to consider. Maybe this week an option could be to trade out Williams for D'Ambrosio. Maybe D'Ambrosio is going to make more cash and quicker than Williams. And maybe you want to have a body on the field like D'Ambrosio instead of Williams. It's an option. I think for me, I'm going to wait to see how D'Ambrosio performs next week. And if he gets another 120, 110, I have to seriously consider bringing him in somehow. and maybe even for Williams. But yeah, I'll assess that then. Carl Amon, he had a decent game. Was expecting a little bit more, but I guess, his score wasn't too bad. He's only owned by 1.5% of teams. There was so much talk on him in the preseason from the content creators about picking him, and in the end, no one really picked him. But he ended up having 18 possessions and a goal for 89 points, and I think he'll average that 85 to 100 point average this year. Jai Newcomb was a real disappointment. He'll come good though. He's a good player, but just a really, really bad game, unfortunately. He only had 21 possessions for 66 points. If you own him, like 11% of teams own him, so that's a decent amount. Look, you may want to just give him one more week and see how he performs, and then make your decision from there whether you keep him or not. But if he has another game like this, then his break even's already 140. So he's going to drop a lot in price if he doesn't have a really good game this week. So you may want to consider what to do with Newcomb if you've got him. Cam McKenzie, I was looking at him just because there's a few of those players around that 200 to 300 mark in the forward line. And so he's 271k. He only had 14 possessions in 79% game time for 57 points. So he wasn't very impressive. And look, he may not be the cash cow that we thought he was going to be. Only owned by 2% of teams, so not too much interest there. But James Sicily, there's a lot of interest in Sicily, and a lot of talk around his role and how he played. He's owned by 18% of teams, so he's worth talking about. There's a few that own him, and we all, I guess, kind of knew the writing was on the wall with Sicily when we found out that Blank was injured, and we know the stats behind Sicily when Blank isn't playing. And in addition to Blank not being there, there's some other defenders that aren't down there as well, which now means that Sicily has to man up on someone. And in this game, I think he ended up manning up on Guelphy, and he ended up with 11 possessions, 94% game time for just 43 points. So I think we definitely need to keep an eye on him and his role, and wait till he bottoms out. His break-even's 196. And then maybe we can jump on him later when some Hawthorn players come back. Well, Blank won't be, but maybe keep an eye on his role, see if he can get that loose man in defense again. If we start noticing that, then it might be worth jumping on him a little bit later. Going to the Giants and the North game. So I am happy to say that I am a Tom Green owner, along with 46% of the competition. There were a lot of, there wasn't that much ownership on him, but I guess after he did so well in round 0, a lot of teams jumped on him, and he had a great game, 27 possessions, but again, too many handballs. He had 24 handballs of those, 27. He had, was it 27 or 37 possessions? One of those. It must have been 37 possessions, that's right. But he had 24 handballs. But it did include 9 tackles and a goal for 152 points. So fantastic start. I'm expecting Green to be in the top 5 of scorers this year. So he's going to have, I think, a great year. And that's why I started with him. Even though he's got his bye in round 3, I just thought I'm not going to miss out on the scores I know he's going to get against Collingwood and North. And now he's got West Coast next week. So he's going to go ballistic. Although it is over there in West Coast. And they did apply some decent pressure in the game today. But we also saw what Caleb Sarong did. 170 Sarong got today on no, that wasn't against West Coast. Sorry, that was, yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, no, that was against West Coast. So we all saw like what he got in that game. And yeah, sorry, this is a little bit confused there. I'm sure that was against West Coast, wasn't it? Yeah, that's right. I don't know why I got confused. I actually watched that game. But yeah, so anyway, so, that's right. Sorry about that, everyone. Port played West Coast, Fremantle played Brisbane. So we saw how many players from Port scored. It's like eight or nine players averaged over 100 against the Eagles. So I think Green's going to have a pretty good score against West Coast next week. So really looking forward to that game. Likely I'll probably have him as my captain as well, and my VC Dacos or Gorn or something like that. Lockie Whitfield, he continues to play very, very good football, much like from a few years ago. And he had another good score. So he had 29 possessions, 8 marks for 118 points. And he looks like he's got that good role of halfback again. And hopefully he gets back to that 104 to 106 average from a few years ago. 8.4% owned. Does have the buy in round 3. I was thinking of actually having Whitfield there in a D3 instead of Will Powell, and I was going to do the price chase on Whitfield and then trade him, but I just couldn't afford him. I actually was I think there's only 6k difference between them, and I only had nearly 5k, so I couldn't do it. But Will Powell, I was backing him in, and Will Powell's done all right as well. So, if you've got Whitfield, hold on to him, or you may decide to trade him out at round 3 for a Sheasel, if you can afford him. That's one option. Cadman, he ended up actually doing quite well. He's going to be a pretty decent cash cow for us. And he ended up having 8 possessions and kicked 2 goals for 72 points. So he's done quite well. His break-even's negative 56. If you've started with him, hold on to him. If you want to bring him in, you can bring him in. 27% of teams own him. Obviously, he's not going to be there in round 3, but I don't think we're worried too much about the early buy for our rookies. We just want to make cash. That's what it's all about with our rookies. A player that I was hot on initially was Harry Himmelberg. Only 2% owned, so I won't talk about him too much, but he only ended up having 16 possessions for 59 points. He did score 101 last week. So as I said previously, he's trained all full preseason in defense, and he's playing only in defense. But I expect him to do better than 59. So we'll see how he ends up going throughout the year. Jacob Weir, he was a 123k rookie that some might have jumped on. 8.4% owned, but he only had 14 possessions in 77% game time for 46 points. So look, he's got that wing role that Isaac Cumming would normally have, but Isaac Cumming's still injured, so he'll continue to play on the wing. But these scores aren't great. Break-even's negative 25, so if you do own him, you can hold on to him or not, or you could just trade him to a better rook. But he's not getting those big numbers. Moving on to the north side, so Harry Sheasel, man, he's just a gun. He's just getting so much ball in that back half. He had 32 possessions, 23 of those were kicks, 9 marks for 130 points. I definitely want to go ahead with that strategy of mine. At round 3, I'll be going to trading Will Powell to Harry Sheasel. So as you can see there's something like $43,000 difference between Will Powell and Harry Sheasel. And Sheasel's break-even's only 78, and he'll smash that. He's going to have another great year in his second year of AFL football. I'm pretty rapt about LDU, and that's because everyone saw what he did in the preseason game, and as I mentioned in my video, you don't even bother with scores that premiums get in the preseason game. If they get a really high score, that's nice. If they get a really low score, okay, it's a low score, but you don't worry about that. Like, what did LDU get in that preseason game? It was like 30 or 40 points. He's not going to average 30 or 40 points. He's a premium. He's going to average around at least 100. And that's what happened. He came out and had 29 possessions, 6 tackles, 11 contested possessions for 121 points, and that was in 88% game time. That's the good thing with LDU. He spends a lot of time on the ground. And now, because of what happened with his preseason game, his selection dropped, and now he's only owned by 7% of teams. He's basically become like a pod. So I'm actually really happy with that, and really happy with the way he played and the way he looked, and that was a really good score from him. I was really impressed with Tristan Sherry. I know there were a few that were, I always spell it that way even though it sounds that way. It's Xerri even though it's pronounced Sherry. So yeah, he ended up having a great game, only owned by 6%, even though there was a lot of talk around him of people wanting to start Sherry, doing maybe the English and Sherry or the Gone and Sherry, just save that cash up instead of using Grundy. But yeah, he was very good, and he was rucking against a good quality ruckman in Kieran Briggs, because Briggs had a good season last season. And Briggs only ended up scoring 57 points, but Sherry ended up having 18 possessions, 9 tackles, 19 hitouts, and 1 goal for 107 points. So I've spoken about Sherry in the past. Look, the reason why I didn't pick him, I just wasn't sure whether he would be able to perform around the mark I was hoping to, which was 95 to 100 point average is what I'm hoping for with him. But it was such a small sample size from last year. He only played 2 games without Goldstein last year, and I think he got 105 and 73 or something like that. So very small sample size to know whether he would be a good pick, because there's ruckmen who ruck solo who aren't big scorers. Like you think of Ned Reeves or you think of Sam Draper and a few other ruckmen. So I just wasn't sure about Sherry, but he ended up having a really good game. And if you own him, well done, hold on to him. But, an option could be that you trade Grundy down to Sherry. So Sherry's break-even's 46, and he should smash that this week. Grundy's break-even is 57, and I would say that he should do much better than that. So it could be an option going from Grundy to Sherry if you want, or wait till next week maybe and make that move just before his price increases. But yeah, it's just an option to think about. Colby McKercher did very, very well. Very happy with him. Was watching him closely. He had a good game, getting a lot of loose ball down back, some easy chip marks and kicks. He ended up with 22 possessions and 8 marks in 77% game time for 88 points. So he's going to make us a lot of cash, and I will definitely be moving him onto my ground instead of having Roberts there, and I'll move Roberts onto my bench. So he's owned by 64% of teams. So yeah, everyone's done well there with McKercher. Zane Dersma, he actually did okay. He looked really good. He looks like he's got good job security. And he ended up scoring like 71 points. And that was from 10 possessions and 2 goals in 83% game time. So yeah, I think if you've started him, like 32% of teams own him. So yeah, good decision, good choice. I think he's going to make some good money this year, and he's definitely got the job security. George Wardlaw was one that was a little bit disappointing, and he looked good. 8.5% ownership there, and he ended up with 17 possessions in 72% game time for 69 points. So if you're an owner, you might want to just wait and see next week to see how he goes. But he looked good. But yeah, it's just not translating in him getting more of the ball and in translating into SuperCoach scores. A disappointing result from Zach Fisher owners. Again, not to panic. He's 37% owned, and that's understandable. He looked great in the preseason games, and then in the preseason game. Sorry, that's right. He didn't play in round 0, of course. Look, he played across half back. North were looking to give him the ball, so he's got the role. It's all there. He had 21 possessions, so he's getting the ball, and 17 of those were kicks. So North are, looking to him to give him the ball as a good disposer of the ball. So they want him to kick the ball off halfback. But unfortunately, he just ended up with 50 points. So, if you're an owner, you might be a bit disappointed about that. And he's finished on 50 because he lost 32 points in clangers and free kicks. I think he had 7 clangers and 1 free kick. So it's 32 points that he could have gotten. He could have gotten 82, maybe more than that. Nothing to panic about with Zach Fisher. He's better than that. His disposal rate's better than that. So yeah, we'll see how he goes next week. Toby Pink, there'd be some that would own him as a cheap rookie in defense. Yeah, 13% owned. He's going to be a slow burn. He had 10 possessions in 85% game time for 44 points. So he'll probably average around that 40 to 50 point mark, I think, this year if you own him. So we're looking at, and who else was I looking at here? For North, I think I have forgotten a player. Let me just bring up the scores for the North game. I'm just missing someone. Where are we? Who have I forgotten? So I think Lazaro. Yeah, that's the other player I didn't mention. It was. I think it's Lazaro that I'm talking about here because I got my notes here, but I forgot to put who the player was. Lazaro. Yes, I think it is Lazaro, and he was playing that forward mid role. He did have 53% CBAs, so he actually had a decent amount of time in the midfield, but unfortunately, he only had 13 possessions in 81% game time. I'll just bring him up. And 42 points. That is Lazaro. So he ended up scoring 42 points. And we're expecting a little bit better from him. He's owned by 20% of teams. We'll just have to keep a look out for him next week as well to see how he performs. Getting 53% game CBAs is pretty good. I would have expected him to get more than 42 points. So let's just see how he goes next week. Moving on to the Geelong and St Kilda game. So Danger. He turned back the clock. We're not going to really pick him, but he is worth mentioning. He ended up with 134 points. He had 87% CBA, so he's playing in the midfield. I guess that's because Cam Guthrie is out. So who knows with Danger? Like if he ends up, getting 80 to 90% CBAs. And he's getting good time on ground, then who knows what he can do. But he is 490k, and I think there's other players out there that are worth getting. But anyway, moving on from Danger, Max Holmes, he's definitely a player that is worth talking about. Great value. He ended up with 23 possessions, 10 marks for 112 points. So here's another one to have a look at. Only just under 5% owned, but he's got that halfback role and he looks great in that role. So we'll see how he goes again next week. He's 446k. He's in that 4 to 500k range like a few other players, and he might be really good value for his owners this year. Tom Stewart, he had a typical Tom Stewart game. He ended up with 22 possessions, 17 of those were kicks, 6 marks for 105 points. So if you've started with Tom Stewart, he's a safe premium, one that you'd be pretty happy with that. You'd probably be wanting him to get, if possible, that 110 to 115. But 105 is good, and he'll have a good year. Oliver Dempsey. So here's one we really have to think about. There might be actually a few owners of him already. So only 4% owned. He's 148k, but he had a really good game. He had 15 possessions, 7 marks, 3 goals for 96 points. So he becomes now a serious consideration, especially only 148k. especially those who have Jai Clark. I mean, I'm thinking, like for my team, maybe trading Clark out, swapping him with Wilson, and then bringing Dempsey onto the ground. I might do it this week. I might do it next week. If I do it this week, it does mean that I need to find that extra cash. So I need to do a second trade. So yeah, I don't know. I might actually wait until next week to bring Dempsey into the team. But yeah, he's off to a good start, and he's got job security by the looks of it. And if he can average around that 60 to 70 mark, he'll be a fantastic cash cow for us. Sean Manor. He unfortunately started on as the sub. So he ended up having 5 kicks, 2 tackles in 26% game time for 29 points. So his point per minute is actually really good. And even in the practice game, his points per minute were really good. So, hopefully he can actually start for Geelong. And when he does, and if he does get some regular games, I think that's when we really need to look at him. And he might be a really good option to bring in. But yeah, he is a risk of being a sub, whether that be at the start of the game or being subbed out during the game. So that's something we have to keep in mind. Jai Clark, he was one of the big disappointments. I mean, he's a rookie, so you don't want to have a crack at the rookies. But even so, he had 35% CBAs rotating between the midfield and forward. So that's pretty decent. He had 13 possessions in 59% game time for just 13 points. Really disappointing. So, look, we may feel a bit reactionary. We may want to just trade him out this week, and that's completely understandable. Or maybe we wait just one more week, see how he goes, and then maybe trade him out then. But it is something I'm going to have to think about. I really would prefer Wilson in my midfield because that gives me good flexibility, and then trading Clark to Dempsey. I think with that score of 96, he's off to a great start. He's going to make some really good cash, Dempsey, I think. Moving on to St Kilda, so Rowan Marshall had a good game as usual. He's an Uber premium, and he dominated the ruck against Reece Stanley. He had finished with 19 possessions, 36 hit-outs for 127 points. He also had 5 clangers, so he actually lost 20 points as well because of those clangers. But he's a premium, and if you've started with him, there's 6% of teams have started with him. You'd be pretty happy with him, and obviously you'd be holding him throughout the year. It was great to see Jack Steele back to the Jack Steele that we know and love, and if you're an owner of him, you'd be really happy with his performance. 12% owned. He did present value, but there were some that were a bit worried about whether he can get back to how he scored from a few years ago, especially I think with the way that the Saints are sort of playing a bit more now. There's not as many stoppages, and so there's a few people concerned whether he's going to get enough of the ball. But look, he ended up with 25 possessions, 7 marks, 6 tackles, 12 contested possessions for 119 points. So he's great value. If you've started him, you'd be really happy with that. And he's definitely worth a consideration bringing into your team if you want to kind of change things around and restructure a little bit, or if you've got room for him, there might be an option. Maybe you're not happy with Martin. You might want to upgrade to Jack Steele. Could be an option. So yeah, a few things to think about. Riley Bonner was another player that's worth talking about. There was some hype on him, of course, because of how he played in the preseason game. He's 9% owned, and it just showed that preseason game wasn't a fluke. He played that role across half-back that normally Jack Sinclair plays, and he ended up with 28 possessions, 24 of those were kicks in 93% game time. So he spent a lot of time on the ground, which is a good sign, and scored that 102 points. So he's priced at an average of, I think, 51, and he's only 284k. So, we could bring him in this week. We'll see how he goes next week. But I really want to see how he performs while Jack Sinclair's in the team. That's what I want to see. Once Jack Sinclair takes that role, what happens to Riley Bonner? And I think Sinclair's probably due back either this coming week against Collingwood or maybe even next week. So we'll have to keep a lookout for that. Darcy Wilson, he's going to be a great cash cow for us. He had a good game, 11 possessions, kicked 2 goals in 78% game time for 66 points. I think he'll make some good cash for us. He'll hopefully average between that 60 to 70 mark. Break even's negative 17, and that's just going to get better. The only thing with him is that he could have scored more, but he had 36% disposal efficiency. But he's got that job security from Ross Lyon. Like, Ross Lyon loves him. So yeah, like I said, he'll be a good cash cow for us. Moving on to the Gold Coast and the Adelaide game. Matt Rowell, like Sarong, is the real deal. He is in absolute beast mode, Rowell, at the moment. The numbers he's putting up are crazy. So he had 29 possessions, 10 tackles, kicked a goal, 20 contested possessions for 155 points, following on from his 137 last week. His break even is 25, so it's obviously quite low. His price, he's 571k, but yeah, he just looks awesome. And he's priced at an average of 102, and he's averaging 146 at the moment. Now, he's probably not going to be able to hold that, but he's due for a pretty massive price hike. Now, is he worth bringing in this week to play like one game and then have his bye? Because his price is going to go up this week. There's a few decisions there. 14% of teams own him, so they'd be pretty happy with his performance. But yeah, a little bit to think about with Matt Rowell, whether we bring him in or not. Now, I've got his teammate Touk Miller in my team, and I am ecstatic with Touk. He's playing some great football. He scored 116 last week and then a great score this week. He had 29 possessions. 20 of those were handballs, though, unfortunately. Hopefully he can reverse that. But he had 9 tackles, 19 contested possessions, 10 clearances for 137 points. This is the Touk Miller of old, from just a couple of years ago, where he was averaging like 120 to 130, and I think he'll do that again. He was averaging that 2 years in a row, a couple of years ago, and then last year he started great again. First 5 games he was averaging, I think, 115 before he got injured. Then he came back many weeks later playing with an injury. So I just knew that he was going to start well, and I'm very happy with the way that he is playing. So his owners would be very happy. He's 23% owned. Sam Flanders, he was a big talking point through the preseason. Firstly, with having that pretty average score in the preseason, but then having a great score in round 0 where he got 124, and then he backed it up again this week where he had 35 possessions for 128 points. And he had 52% CBAs. That will probably be around the mark for him. So you've got the big 4 pretty much. There's not a lot of other rotation going through there. It's pretty much Anderson, Rowell, Miller, and Flanders going through that midfield. So I think he is going to be the F1 for the year. I think the highest averaging F1 for the year. I will be looking at trying to bring him in at some point. That tactic of trading Heaney at his buy for Flanders is what I'm planning at this stage. That may change, but we all will need, I think, to have Flanders in our team at some point. I was really happy with Will Powell's game. He backed it up again. He got 123 in his first game in round 0. And then in this game, he had 21 possessions. 15 of those were kicks, which included 10 contested possessions for 118 points. So I'll still be sticking with my strategy at this stage, trading him out after his first price hike after round 3 and trading him over to Sheasel. So that will be my plan. But yeah, I'm very happy with Powell, and he's going to have a good year without a doubt. There was a little bit of praise throughout the week for Tom Berry coming out of coming out of the Gold Coast, and he actually put up a good game. He had 17 possessions, 7 tackles, a goal for 104 points playing in that forward line. Now he's priced at an average of 33, and he's only 163k forward. So again, he's one to think about, but he does have the bye next week, but his price is going to spike up after round 3, so a few things to think about there. Only 1% owned, so not many people own him. But someone who is highly owned is Alex Sexton, 63% owned. He had 17 possessions, 14 of those were kicks, 7 marks in 76% game time for 63 points. Now we have to remember, like, I know we're probably expecting him to get 100 points a game, or hoping that, or because of the role and his experience and this and that, but he's only 133k. So if he can average around 60 to 70 points a game, then he's going to make us money, and that's what we want. But fair enough, considering his role. We are hoping that he might be able to average a little bit more than that. So we'll see. Hopefully how he goes. Bodie Hewland, that was a bit of a surprise because he had a horrible round 0 game. But he ended up with 8 possessions, 90% game time for 57 points. Not too bad, but there's probably better rookies that we can get in our defense. Connor Buderick was awful, just awful. Now he did well in round 0, but in this game, not so much. 6% owned. He only had 7 possessions in 86% game time for just 17 points. There won't be too much of a price change, I would imagine. Yeah, his break even is 56. So if you own him, you may even think about trading him out this week. I mean, will he get 56 points this week? So he might be worth a trade, and he's 300k. So if you're in that 6% that own him, it might be time to trade him. And you've got someone like, if you don't have Williams, you could bring Williams in, but obviously he's got the bye, so definitely not. But D'Ambrosio, he would be the one that you would probably trade to. Or if you want the cash, go down to a cheaper rookie. But I think it's time to move on from Buderick. Going to Adelaide, there was a lot of talk about Rory Laird playing more time in the forward line and not a lot of time in the midfield. But he came out and had a great game, 30 possessions, 10 tackles, 14 contested possessions for 124 points, despite only playing 52% game time. So that shows that he can still score even though he's not in the midfield as much. So if you're owning Laird, there's 5% that own him. So he's a pod. That's fantastic for anyone that's owned him, getting Rory Laird as a pod. And he's going to average anywhere between 110 to 120 this year. Matt Crouch had a great game. He's one of those ones that are in between that 4 to 500k mark. He had a really good game. 33 possessions, but in typical Crouch style, he had 20 of them were handballs. He had 6 tackles, 16 contested possessions in 73% game time for 114 points. So he's owned by 7% of teams, and if you own him, you'll be pretty happy with that. As I mentioned before, we'll look a little bit closely at these players in that range. The Crouches, the Wines, the Nick Martins, the Amons, the Max Holmes. We need to think about them a little bit. Jordan Dawson's the one that most didn't expect that he'd have a lower score. Everyone was probably expecting Rory Laird, and hence why you've got 18% of teams that own Jordan Dawson. And he did have 26 possessions, so he got his hand on the ball. 6 tackles, 12 contested possessions for 82 points. But this is what we have to keep in mind, much like Brodie Grundy and Nick Martin and so forth, is that his disposal efficiency was 57%. He had 9 clangers and 4 free kicks against, which totaled 52 points. He had 52 points taken off him. Now, that is not Jordan Dawson. He is a very good kick and disposer of the ball. So if you're an owner, there's nothing to stress about. He's not doing that every week, just an unfortunate game this week, but he'll come good as most premiums tend to. Excuse me. I was a little concerned how Sam Berry started. My very first, I think, video on players to consider, I did mention Sam Berry because of the way that he started. He was in his third year last year, and everyone was predicting a third-year breakout because of how well he played in the midfield. But the fact that he got a game and named on the ball, but again, that didn't pay too much notice to that, but the fact that he was there and that they spoke, I think it might have been Nix that spoke during the week saying that Berry was very important to them in their team. I thought, well, yeah, let's just jump on him and let's see, how he goes. So he did okay. I mean, he only had 13 possessions, but he did kick a goal in 71% game time for 80 points. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's a pretty good start. He did have 31% CBAs, which I guess was okay. I was hoping that would be more, at least more than Rankin, because Rankin had 37% CBAs. And so I was really hoping that Berry would be that number 4 midfielder. But, we'll have a look. It's still early days. It's one game. So let's have a look next week to see with Sam Berry. There's 8% of teams that own him. So that's a decent amount. So, yeah, we'll see next week anyway how he performs. Chris Burgess, he's a rookie option. A very, very slow burn. Don't know really how many. So only 2% own him. Yeah, I wouldn't think many people would go for him. He only got 34 points. So, yeah, I don't think he's worth it. Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs. So Gawn, he used them fighting words last week with his performance against Grundy and how Grundy used the space to try to stop Gawn. And he came out in an interview and said, yeah, well, bring it on, basically, is what he said. And in typical Gawn style, when his back's against the wall, he came out and put up 162 points. He is a champ, Max Gawn. 26 possessions, 9 marks, 35 hitouts, 12 contested possessions, and 8 clearances for Melbourne for 162 points. That is just Max Gawn to a T. I love that I own him, much like the other 48% of teams. Of course, would have been great to have captained him, but I'm sure some of you probably did out there. Yeah, very happy with Max. Billings, man, Billings was a bit of a surprise. Didn't expect that from him, especially after the round 0 game, where he started as the sub and ended up with 11? 11 points. So his break even is 5 now because of the score that he got this week. So he had 23 possessions, 20 of those were kicks, 15 marks. 15 marks. Kicked a goal for 119 points. So he now becomes a serious consideration. They have the buy in round 6. Is he worth bringing in now? Maybe you have a James Harms. If you've got a James Harms in your team, maybe trade him out for, or a Cam McKenzie, trade them out for Billings now. Is there still risk that he might be the sub or he might get subbed during a game? After that performance, I don't think so, because he just played so well. So yeah, he's one that might get away from us if you don't own him. He's only 6% owned. Yeah, one to think about, I think, with Jack Billings. Petrarca, he, typical Petrarca style, continued on his way. He ended up with 29 possessions, 10 marks, and a goal, 13 contested possessions as well for 119 points. And that will be Petrarca's average for the year. He's going to be around that 120 mark. He's averaging 113 at the moment, but he'll get up to around that 120 mark for the year, in my opinion. And Clayton Oliver, I've definitely got my eyes on him. I reckon many probably do. He's only 3% owned, so he's a pod. But he's actually playing really well. For someone who has such an interrupted preseason, but you just can't stop a gun. These Uber premiums, they're just too good. Get him onto the ground. I mean, he still had 35 possessions. And had, a large number of them were contested. I don't have that number with me, sorry. But he had 7 clangers as well. So he lost 28 points. and he still managed to score 105. So he's slowly bottoming out. His break-even's 179. So this week you'd expect him to drop in price. So I think it'll be really good to we'll see. Hopefully he just keeps dropping and then bottoms out right when his buy is. That would be great. And then we can bring him in after his buy. That's what I'm hoping. But yeah, keep an eye on him. Christian Salem was an interesting one as well. He had 76% CBAs. So he's still playing in the midfield. Even though Oliver's back, he's still playing in the midfield. He had 20 possessions and kicked a goal for 86 points. So I think he's probably going to end up having that 90-point average, which is what he has at the moment. I reckon he'll end up with that 90, give or take, 90-point average, I think, for Salem. Caleb Windsor, really good game from him, and he is a good rookie option. He ended up with 16 possessions, but 10 of those were handballs, unfortunately. 9 contested possessions in 63% game time for 72 points. He was subbed off in that fourth quarter. So that's the risk. I mean, even though I say, yeah, we can bring him in, but that's the risk with these rookies, that they can start as the sub or be subbed off. So yeah, maybe, I think in hindsight, it might not be one to bring in. But look, he still got 72 points. That's more than what you want. Like, you want 60 to 70, and he got 72. So that still would make his 40% of owners happy. So Blake Howes, he's one that we all brought in because of his great round 0 score. And he ended up having a really good score in this game too for his price. He had 16 possessions, 7 marks in 73% game time for 64 points. So his break-even's now negative 86. So if you've got him in the team, 48% of teams own him. If you've got him, he's going to be a great cash cow and should make us a decent amount of money. Marty Hoare, so I just brought him on. I think he'll be better for the run. With Bowie going out, I think that's right up Marty Hoare's alley. He'll step in and play that role. And he had an okay game. He had 14 possessions, 11 of those were kicks, 6 marks in 81% game time for 60 points. So not a bad start. He hasn't played AFL footy for a while. So that's not bad. He'll be better for the run, and I think he should average between that 60 to 70 mark. Going to the Western Bulldogs, as usual, Bont is Bont, and he's just a champ, and he'll be up there in the Brownlow, and he deserves it. He deserved it last year. So yeah, I think Nick Dacos probably would have won it if he didn't get injured. But yeah, hopefully Bont wins the Brownlow this year. He had a great game, 25 possessions, 13 of those were handballs, fortunately, but did kick a goal, 15 contested possessions in those possessions, and scored 126 points. So that's a decent game for Bont. His average is 129 or 130, and he'll average that. 50% of teams own him, and they'd be happy with that, and he's a captain choice every week. Speaking of captain choices every week, his partner in crime, Tim English, also played a good game, or okay game for him. He did lose the ruck battle there to Max Gawn, but he still had 23 possessions, 21 hitouts, 10 contested possessions for 119 points. But he did lose 28 points in clangers, so that could have actually been a lot higher, that score, with Tim English. But yeah, again, if you own him, the 12% of teams own him. If you own him, you'll be pretty happy with that. Libba, I think there's a few teams that own Libba the last time I checked. So 7% of teams anyway. But yeah, he had 32 possessions, but 15 of those were handballs, 13 contested possessions in that, and 9 clearances for 92 points. But like English, he lost 28 points in clangers. So that's why his score was a bit lower than usual. Buku Kamas, he is a rookie in the forward line. I think some pick him. He's owned by just 2% of teams, so I thought some might have jumped on him, but he only had 51 points, so there might be some better options out there. And that's the same for Gallagher. I imagine there wouldn't be many teams that picked him. Only 1% of teams. Yeah, he scored 49 points. He's another rookie option in the forward line. Nick Coffield would have been a popular choice, or some may have jumped off him. No, 60% of teams own him. So he had 10 possessions, 49 points, but I would say that's probably underperforming. We want him to be averaging 60 to 70, and we just have to wait and see whether he becomes a slow burn or whether he picks up his average. Riley Sanders got bevoed, unfortunately, playing decently and well, and got 43 points because Bevo decided to sub him off. He had 16 possessions, 7 marks in 55% game time for 43 points. So now we have to be wary of starting Sanders. He may very well start as the sub or get subbed off. So we just, I don't know if we can risk starting him on the field anymore. The other one was James Harms, mentioned before. So 9% owned, so that's a decent amount. He is a cheap mid-price option, but only had 11 possessions in 70% game time for 35 points. That's really disappointing. He also had 54% disposal efficiency, so that would have affected his score as well. And yeah, I think if you've got him in your team, you could see how he goes next week, and then maybe, or maybe even this week, as I said before, trade him to Billings. Not too sure, but yeah, a couple of options there. Going to the Port and West Coast game. West Coast, look, they put up a really good fight, but Port are playing against a team that will likely finish on the bottom of the ladder. So I don't think we can truly rate their scores. I mean, they had 8 players score over a ton, and a further 4 players score 90 points or more. So, yeah, take it with a grain of salt, I guess. We want to see how these Port players play against better opposition. So, most of us would have gone Gawn and Grundy, but Soldo had a great game. He had 14 possessions, 28 hitouts for 125 points, but he lost 24 points in clangers as well. And we also have to remember he was rucking against Williams. So let's see how he goes next week when he rucks against his ex-teammate in Nankervis to see if he can still put up good scores. Zach Butters, had a good game as per Zach Butters. He had 27 possessions, 8 marks, kicked a goal, 117 points. Connor Rozee also had a good game, 27 possessions, 10 marks, kicked 2 goals for 114 points. They played against West Coast, so yeah, they're going to have a good game. Same with Houston. He, of course, had a good game as well against West Coast off half-back. He scored, 114 points. So, yep, had a really good game. I've been big on Horn Francis all this preseason. I had him in my team pretty much all up until the last couple of weeks when I restructured a little bit. But I'm really happy that he scored well. If he scores well again next week, I think just because I love watching the guy play, I may end up bringing him in. I don't know. But yeah, he had 20 possessions and kicked 2 goals for 112 points. But again, it was against West Coast, so we'll see how he goes next week. And Ollie Wines, he's the other midfielder. And I think there's a few that might own him. 13% of teams own him. He had 23 possessions. 16 of those were handballs, unfortunately. But he did have 11 contested possessions, which was the most of actually any Port player. And that was in 74% game time for 94 points. So his disposal efficiency wasn't the best. It was at 65%, but it's still a good game for him. And he also had 46% CBAs. So I think he should end up averaging around that 100 mark. in my opinion. Moving on to West Coast, there's not many players really to consider, but Elliot Yeo, he did what we would hope from him. He had 20 possessions, 14 of those were handballs, unfortunately, but he had 6 marks, and in that he had 9 contested possessions, 70% game time for 96 points. So that's a good score. Really happy with that. But the 70% game time, it just shows that they're probably easing him into the season, managing his minutes a little bit. He's 10% owned, and I think those 10% of people, including myself, would be pretty happy with that score. Would have been nice if he'd gotten a tackle at the end and got 100 just to see those 3 figures, but that's all right. Pretty happy with 96. Harley Reid did pretty well. He had 43% CBAs as well, so he was being rotated through the midfield and the forward line. Pretty good game, 16 possessions, 10 of those were handballs though, but in that 9 contested possessions in 72% game time for 78 points, so you got to be pretty happy with that. And then the last game, Freo and Brisbane, a few players to talk about for Freo, but as I mentioned earlier, Caleb Sarong went beast mode in this game. He had 46 possessions, 25 of those were handballs, unfortunately, but he still had 6 marks, 7 tackles, 21 contested possessions, and 10 clearances for 170 points. Just massive. It was a bit bittersweet for me because I've had Caleb Sarong in my team all season. I took him out to restructure a bit. I was happy with Connor Rosie's 114, but I didn't expect Caleb Sarong to get 170 in this game. But I'll be keeping an eye on him. I mean, if he goes another 130, 140, 150 next week, I don't know. Maybe I'll move things around again and bring Sarong back in. I love Sarong. I love watching him play. All the research pointed to him having a really good year. So for those 10% or so teams that own him, you'd be so wrapped with that score, and he's going to have a great season for you. Luke Ryan also went kind of beast mode himself. He actually had 33 possessions. 24 of those were kicks, which is good to see. 10 marks for 165 points. So he's only owned by 3% of teams, but man, they would be so happy with that performance. Very unexpected. With Sean Darcy out injured, many people have jumped onto Luke Jackson. 42% of teams own him. He had 18 possessions, but 13 of those were handballs. Had how many hitouts did he have? I don't have that down here. But he had a few hitouts. He kicked 2 goals for 113 points. And I think Jackson will actually improve over the next few games. I mean, he knows how to ruck, but all preseason he has trained in the forward line, not in the ruck. So this is his first game playing in the ruck, and he looked good. But was probably a little bit rusty in the ruck. But I think he'll be good for the run, and hopefully he averages around that. Hopefully he averages around that 115 to 120 mark. That would be awesome. So my strategy with that is around the buys with Grundy and Gawn to bring Jackson into the forward line here, and then bring one of my forwards onto the field that'll hopefully cover. And then post that, when Sam Darcy comes back into the team, I'll be looking at trading Jackson out for a higher averaging forward, I guess. There was a lot of talk around Jordan Clark, and I just remember the last time I looked at him, there wasn't many people picking him, even though there was talk around him. Not even 1% owned. All this talk about him, and no one ended up picking him. He had 24 possessions for 108 points, and he's got that Hayden Young role off halfback. So, if he scores another 100 next week, I don't know, it might be one to consider. Nat Fyfe. So we get to Nat Fyfe, and we got to be happy with that. There's 50% of teams that own him. A lot of teams, or a lot of people were really worried about whether he would be a good pick because of his age and health and fitness, but he had 21 possessions. Again, 15 of those were handballs, unfortunately, but he had 7 tackles. He had 13 contested possessions in 86% game time for his 103 points. Contested possessions, tackles, and 86% game time. That is fantastic signs for Fife, because we're all worried about him, getting managed minutes and that, but they didn't manage his minutes, and he was a contested beast out there, you could say. Really impressive, and I'm really happy as an owner to have him. So he's, I think, going to do quite well until he gets injured, of course, but hopefully he makes some cash for us. Andrew Brayshaw, he had a good game. It was okay. 32 possessions, 8 marks, 11 contested, but he had 7 clangers and 3 free kicks against. So he lost 40 points. He scored 102, but obviously could have been a lot higher. So 40 points he lost. But speaking of losing points, goodness gracious, Hayden Young. He had a very poor game. He started out well, but then he just made some really bad decisions and bad execution. I'll just go through his stats here, give you an indication as to what happened and why he scored so poorly. He had 24 possessions, he had, but a large number of those I think were handballs. He had 10 tackles, which is great, but he had 11 clangers. 11 and 4 free kicks against. He lost 60 points. He had 60 points taken off him. Can you believe that? For a player of Young's ability, considering his kicking skills, it was, I think, a one-off this game. I can't see him getting so many free kicks against and clangers next week. So if you own him, there's 42% of teams that own him. If you own him, nothing to stress about. We'll have a look at him next week. His break-even's up to 127. So for teams that may be wanting to bring him in, who knows? Depending on how he goes next week, he might drop in value a little bit. But he's playing, I think, is he playing North Melbourne? Yeah, I think he's playing North Melbourne next week, so you would think that he would bounce back. Jeremy Sharp, so he ended up being a pretty decent choice for our bench. He's a 123k rook, as you can see, and he had 18 possessions, 14 of those were kicks, which is good, and he played in 85% game time for 70 points, so you got to be happy with that as a rookie on your bench. For Brisbane, I don't really know how many teams have Dunkley. Don't know many, 4% owned. So, but he had 113 points. Jared Lyons might be one to think about just because of his past. He's put up some big numbers in the past, and he had 48% CBAs with Lachie Neale out of the team. Ended up with 25 possessions, 6 marks, 7 contested, 70% game time for 81 points. So decent score, but that will be affected when Lachie Neale comes back. Kyle Oman, there was talk about him. He was the sub, ended up with 17 points. So, I'm not really considering him. So that's all the games. A lot of information there. I know it's gone for nearly an hour and a half. Sorry about that. I'll try and make it shorter next time. But there's a lot of information to get through. I think for me this week, I might be bringing in D'Ambrosio. But maybe I'll just wait and see how he plays against Melbourne next week. Also this week, we'll look out for Zach Reed to see what the injury report is on him and his hamstring awareness. Badly or very disappointed with Jai Clark. I don't know what I'll do there. I do like Dempsey. Do I bring him in this week or next week? I'll see. I'm not really too sure. So aside from that, I'm pretty happy with everything else. I'm pretty happy with everything else. I think, it's only Williams that's out of the team. I'll bring in Hoare, or I don't know, maybe I'll just trade Williams out for D'Ambrosio. I don't know. D'Ambrosio's already got that massive score in his price cycle, so I might do that. Captaincy options. So I think for my team, you've got your usual captains. I don't need to really go through at every club. But for my team, likely I will VC Dacos and Gawn and Captain Green. Likely that's what I will do. So that's my round one review. Again, everyone, I really hope that you had a good start. If you didn't get a good start, you can always come back from no matter where you've ranked in round one. There's been a number of super coaches out there that have finished in the top 5K, the top 1K, the top 100, who ranked out in the 30s, 40s, 50,000s after round one. So yeah, you can definitely come back from that. I will try to put up a video during the week as a preview, but I probably won't get time. I'll probably only be able to do the one video a week as a review. But yeah, for players, I think to bring in for this week, I've already mentioned a few players there that you could consider for your team. But yeah, so hopefully, yeah, you've been able to get a fair bit out of this review. All the best for your team coming up this weekend, and I'll catch you for the round 2 review. Thanks for watching, or thanks for listening. See ya.